Sorry, my mic came off. I threw up a little bit. Alrighty, yeah, I just kind of want to do a couple maneuvers, see what it can do before I put her down, you know?
Many of you may remember the amazing true story of Horizon Air Ground Services agent Richard Bebo Russell. On Friday evening, August 10th, 2018, Russell, who was not a pilot nor ever took a flying lesson in his life, stole a Horizon Air Bombardier Q400 commuter plane and took it on his now infamous joyride over Seattle, Washington. Well, amazingly, Richard wasn't the first non-pilot to commit grand theft airplane. As a matter of fact, there have been quite a few true stories of sticky-fingered daredevils who have been lost to the fog of history, but no longer. We talk about it next on Maximus. Greetings everybody, Maximus here. I hope you're all doing well wherever you may be all around this great big world of ours. If this is your first time with us on Maximus Aviation, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. It's always free, and be sure to click the bell so you can be notified whenever we release new content. The most recent incident, of course, took place on Friday, August 10, 2018, when 29-year-old Horizon Air Ground Services agent Richard Bebo Russell used a pushback tractor to push a Horizon Air 76-seat, $35 million Bombardier Q400 aircraft onto the apron, something he's done many times before. However, the difference this time was that Richard, who was not a pilot, climbed into the cockpit and fired up the engine. Then without clearance, he taxied the Q400 out to the runway and simply took off from Seattle's SeaTac Airport up and away straight into the history books. Posthumously, of course. In audio recordings released on YouTube, Russell can be heard chatting in an upbeat, enthusiastic tone with the air traffic controllers trying to talk him down.
Just flying the plane around, do you seem comfortable with that?
Oh, hell yeah, it's a blast, man. I played video games before, so I know what I'm doing a little bit.
Back on the ground, onlooker John Waldron took his now viral video that shows the plane rolling inverted at a low altitude, then pulling into a half loop in an aerobatic high-G maneuver called a split S. Whether through luck or skill, Russell managed to pull the plane out of its screaming descent just above the wave tops. Personally, I don't think Russell ever expected to even survive that first loop. After he did indeed survive, suddenly the will to live seemed to be reignited, at least just for a bit longer, especially once he discovered that he stole what amounted to the Ferrari of turboprop aircraft. He decided to extend his one-way mission just a little longer and enjoy the vomit-covered ride. An F-15 fighter jet was scrambled to intercept the Q400, which ultimately crashed into Keytron Island, about 30 miles from the airport. It's too bad he was in such a dark place and wanted out, because I believe he could have landed that plane, and I believe Richard Russell would be a living legend today. The incident, while bizarre and tragic, is not unprecedented. In fact, there have been a number of occurrences in recent decades in which ground personnel absconded with aircraft that didn't belong to them, nor were most of them trained pilots. First, a few honorary mentions. 13 May 1945. A Union Airways Lockheed Lodestar aircraft was stolen by a 19-year-old apprentice aircraft engineer who had been turned down for pilot training by the Royal New Zealand Air Force. On takeoff, he mistook the landing gear lever for the throttle, and the aircraft veered into a line of trees and caught fire. He survived. 22 August 1953. An Aeroflot Lisunov Li-2 was stolen by a mechanic at Moscow's Byoyko Airport. He took off, but the aircraft attained a high angle of attack, stalled, and crashed from a height of about 30 feet. He also survived. 26 April 1955. A Vickers Varsity plane of the Royal Air Force was taken on an unauthorized flight by a mechanic from Thorney Island RAAF station. The airplane flew towards the London area, circling the city and continuing across the channel towards France. The airplane crashed into a farmhouse in Onong, France. Sadly, 4 occupants of the house were killed, along with the pilot. 5 April 1956. A DC-3 C-47 passenger plane for Real Transportes Aéreos was stolen by a drunk mechanic who had been dismissed from the company. The aircraft crashed on takeoff from Sao Paulo Cahongos Airport, Brazil. The mechanic survived. Also, 29 November 1958, another DC-3 AC-47 was reportedly taken on an illegal flight and crashed by an RAAF aircraftsman who was not a trained pilot. No word if he survived. 23 January 1965, two drunk mechanics boarded a Lockheed SP-2H Neptune of the Dutch Navy at night and attempted to take off from Valkenburg in AS, the Netherlands, for a joy flight. The airplane crashed at sea, killing both men. And that brings us to our love story. A story that was probably a big story back in 1969, much like the Seattle Horizon Bombardier theft that took place nearly 50 years later. On May 23, 1969, during the height of the Cold War, homesick American Sergeant and Crew Chief, 23-year-old Paul Meyer was stationed at Midland Hall Air Base in England. After having his application rejected to return back to the United States early to see his wife Jane, Meyer drank heavily that night, and in a plot twist that would have made a great Hollywood thriller, he decided to go home anyway. Meyer posed as a captain and ordered a Hercules C-130 to be refueled and set course for Langley, Virginia, USA. Meyer possessed a private pilot's license but was not trained to handle the large military cargo plane, especially on the long dark route over the Atlantic Ocean. While in the air, Meyer, who had just been married 8 weeks earlier, called his wife on the overseas radio from the cockpit and said, "Guess what, honey, I'm coming home." He triumphantly told her, waking her from a deep sleep. "Honey, I got a bird in the sky and I'm coming home," he gleefully told his confused and sleepy bride. Meyer's jubilation and bravado, however, soon left him, as the cold reality of what he'd just done and what still lay ahead in the inky blackness over the English Channel had begun to sink in. "Well, honey," he told his wife, "I'll be really honest with you. I kinda think I made a dang wrong mistake here. I feel like the biggest dodo around right now." Jane, his wife, clearly terrified for her husband, had to steel her own nerves as she tried to reassure her panicking groom. However, what she didn't know at the time was that the entire 20-minute conversation she had with her husband was recorded by the United States Air Force. You can listen to a recreation of the entire conversation from the BBC. I'll post a link down below. "You are the most wonderful thing in this whole world, you hear me?" she says. "Honey, I'm going to bring you home. I'm going to fly you right in here, okay?" But alas, it wasn't meant to be. An hour and 45 minutes into the flight, Meyer crashed into the English Channel. To add to his woes, Meyer had recently been passed over for a promotion and had been arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct. Recently, nearly half a century later in 2019, divers believed to have found the wreckage of his plane, but out of respect and as part of an official investigation, they refused to reveal the location. To this day, there still remains some confusion about how Meyer's plane ended up in the water. Some say he crashed, while other witnesses report he was shot down. 22 August 1979. Recently fired airline mechanic 23-year-old Armando Nieto Jaramillo stole a military HS-748 transport plane from Bogota El Dorado Airport and crashed soon after takeoff, killing himself and 3 unfortunate people on the ground. May 25, 2003. Ben Charles Padilla, a certified flight engineer, aircraft mechanic, and private pilot, disappeared while working in the Angolan capital Luanda for a Florida-based aerospace sales and leasing company. On May 25, 2003, shortly before sunset, Padilla boarded the company's Boeing 727-223 tail number November 844 Alpha Alpha. With him was a helper he had recently hired, John Michael Mutantu from the Republic of Congo. The two had been working with Angolan mechanics to return the 727 to flight-ready status so they could reclaim it from a quote-unquote business deal gone bad. But neither could fly it. Mutantu was not a pilot and Padilla had only a private pilot's license. A 727 ordinarily requires a trained aircrew of 3. According to press reports, the aircraft began taxiing with no communication between the crew and the tower. Maneuvering erratically, it entered a runway without clearance. With its lights and transponder off, the plane took off to the southwest and headed out over the Atlantic Ocean. The 727 and the 2 men have not been seen since. Many strongly speculate that the plane was stolen as part of an insurance scam, or perhaps taken by terrorists who planned to use it as a flying bomb. But the truth, however, remains unknown. And finally, our last case, and the most successful thief on the list, and a true underdog story. This is the story of Lance Corporal Howard A. Foote. On July 4th, 1986, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Howard A. Foote Jr. stole an A-4M Skyhawk ground attack jet from Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, California, and took it on a 45-minute aerobatic joyride before returning to base and landing safely. No big deal? Well, there's much more to this story. Foote was an experienced glider pilot and had undergone 100 hours of simulator flying time in the Skyhawk. He had hoped to become a military pilot before his ambitions were derailed by health issues. So in the early morning hours of July 4th, 1986, 21-year-old Lance Corporal Howard A. Foote Jr. climbed a ladder leading into the cockpit of an A-4M Skyhawk. He lit the engines, taxied to one of Marine Corps Air Station El Toro's runways, which were unlit at the time. He pushed the throttles forward and took off into history. Finally, Lance Corporal Foote had realized his dream to fly a military fighter jet, albeit quite feloniously. As news reports at the time recount, Foote flew out towards San Clemente Island, executing loops, rolls, and high-speed maneuvers before turning back to MCAS El Toro after about 45 minutes to attempt a landing. This time the runways were all very well lit and the base was buzzing with activity due to his unauthorized acquisition. After several landing attempts, Foote put the A-4M down safely and was quickly detained immediately upon exiting the cockpit. There was little doubt that the whole stunt was extremely dangerous, but it was also an amazing accomplishment, although Foote was no novice to flying. He was an accomplished glider pilot who set world records at a very young age. Just months prior to his Skyhawk caper, Foote attempted to set a glider altitude record that resulted in an air embolism in his eye. Due to the nature of the injury, he was told he would never be able to fly for the military. The news absolutely crushed him, but as you just found out, he became a go-fast jet pilot on his own terms. The path that got him flying a glider at 41,000 feet, which caused the embolism and eventually commandeering a Skyhawk, was a circuitous one. Foote befriended the Marine Corps general who commanded MCAS El Toro at a glider base in the Mojave Desert. The general was also a keen glider enthusiast and realized that Foote was a talented pilot with loads of potential. Foote served 4.5 months in the brig. He was discharged from the Marine Corps, but all charges against Foote were dropped. And this is the point where some of you older subscribers out there who may remember Paul Harvey, well, this is the rest of the story. All charges were dropped against Foote, most likely thanks due to his close relationship with retired El Toro Chief General William A. Boomer, a mentor of Foote's who had encouraged him to participate in the gliding challenge that dashed his dreams. After being discharged, he tried to fly for Israel and Honduras, however both those attempts failed to materialize. Foote later qualified as a test pilot in more than 20 different military and civilian aircraft and became a contractor to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Foote holds patents in aviation design and engineering technology. He finally ended up moving to China to start his own helicopter company. This guy was amazing. Why haven't they made a movie about any of these guys yet? So how about that? Some real movie pilot stuff there that actually happened. I'm interested to hear if any of you maybe have heard similar or different versions of these amazing stories. Well, that's it for now. What do you think? Let me know down below, and as always, please remember to subscribe, like, share, and ring the bell. And until next time, remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you next time in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.